first.
Hello? You see, we start the session because Professor Bajaj has to catch a train at 3 o'clock. So we'll give him Professor M.M. Bajaj. He is the Chancellor of International Kamadhenu Ahimsa University, Vikaspur, New Delhi. Right? And he will be speaking on concept of Ahimsa from Vedic era to the present day. Destruction of the universe by the BIS processes. Professor M.M. Bajaj.
इससे मेरी आवाज ठीक आ रही है आप लोग हैं हाँ इंग्लिश आई विल स्पीक इन डियर फ्रेंड्स इट्स माय ग्रेट प्लेजर टू बी हियर विद यू एंड एज यू नो वी ऑलवेज स्टार्ट विद द सिंपल वेरी फर्स्ट संस्कृत लाइन ओम विश्वानि देवी सवितुर दुरितानि परासु यद भद्राणि I mean, the meaning was, these lines were that, O God, O Almighty, keep us away from all the bad things of this world and bring us to the good things of this world. If you look up the Vedas came 1.97 10 to the power 9 years back. When I make this statement, it is also scientifically based. We have measured with the help of the radioactivity experiments. We know when this Srishti was made, and we know it was about 2 billion years before when this whole thing came. The radioactivity experiments are still going on in our university. You can always verify it. And this Vedas, as we know, the language is not the same as Sanskrit, which you know. And therefore, the whole concept of setting up a constitution for mankind was given in Vedas. And we went on keeping that tradition in the form of written books, but not in written books, but in Shrutiya. That's why we call it Sam Shrutain Game Mahi, Ma Shrutain Vi Radhishi. Sam Shrutain Game Mahi, Shrutain Vi Radhishi. We should follow or what is said in Shrutiya, and we should not follow the other way. Sam Shrutain Game Mahi, Ma means Vi Radhishi. That means we should not go away from it. Well, friends, I am bringing you from Vedic era to the present day. And in a very small time, you will see how we jump from one period to the other. And when we go, I will confine to one value of life, that is ahimsa. Ahimsa means non-violence, but how it was told, they called mother cow, aghanya, and so on. But went on moving, we come to Mahatma Buddha, which became Bhagwan Buddha, and so on. Now this Buddha, Lord Buddha, gave the concept of ahimsa, and he went on spreading it. Now, I have been visiting all those places where he has gone, and then I have also been interested how the earthquakes are coming, how the cyclones are coming, how tornadoes are coming, how typhoons are coming, what is the chemistry, what is the physics behind it, and we find all these things are emerging from Vedas. So let us come back to the concept of how earthquakes are coming. Now, we have recently completed the book. I have brought the book also. It was only ready yesterday. Now, the cover of that book gives you what I would like to tell you. Can you have a back on that? Now, we call these processes that killing of animals, or killing yourself with the help of wine, or killing yourself with the help of anachar. Anachar means wrong things. This we call it as Bisological process. What is BIS? BIS stands for breakdown of integrated system. Your eyes, if I take it and keep it here, those eyes will not be able to see, because that is a differential system. If I take you as a whole, you are an integrated system. You function only in the integrated system. And if you do things, then we call it BIS. Now the whole concept is from Vedas. From Vedas, Upanishad and all that. When you come to that, now in the present day, it was necessary for us to put in the mathematical form how you can write it, how you can predict it, and how you can make advantage of the whole piece of Vedas in the form of mathematics. Now for us it was very necessary to put violence, alcoholism and anachar or bad method of living putting on the same platform. It was very, very difficult for us. Just as Albert Einstein succeeded in putting X, Y, Z and T same platform, we were fortunate we got success. What we did, we used the complex variables, and using that we put R plus J L omega plus 1 by J omega C as the function which is responsible for the destruction of this. R stands for violence. Capital R stands for violence. This is violence. This is the violence, the first part. Then we are putting how the animals are being butchered. We calculated all that, how many animals are being butchered, and then putting wine and all those things, doing all kind of corrupt practices. I mean, you read about rapes and gang rapes and all that. All those things are coming in our theory. So we find if the bis load on a person is high, he has a very high possibility of getting affected by accidents. If the bis load on a family is there, family is going to be ruined. And if the bis load on a state is there, it is going to be ruined. If the bis load increases on a nation, it destroys. If it goes on a planet, it is destroyed. And if you do it on several planets, you are able to make large number of black holes, supernova explosion, gamma ray burst and all those things. So we have made use of physiological processes to explain how these black holes are being formed, how supernova explosion is taking place, and how the gamma ray bursts are taking place in the cosmos. That means I am using now Vedas from the concept of ahimsa to explain almost everything, and it has got very high application. It has got very high application, because what I was listening to our principal, the director, Professor Sharma also, we are interested not only to read and to understand Vedas, but also to take technological advantages. So you will be happy to know that we have succeeded in stopping the earthquakes. We have succeeded in getting hurricanes being reduced. We have succeeded in getting several other diseases also being cured. For example, leukemia, and also our very important disease which we have succeeded recently, that was diabetes, by using the non-violent methods. And these are the data which we are putting in our thesis. So far about 26 theses have already come, and we started with the understanding of leukemia, and then we went on searching out what we can do, how to understand it, all that. So I would like to say that we start everything from Vedas and then try to go on finding out what we can do. I will give you a couple of examples. You will be happy to know that it is now we have possibility of arranging the things in a very difficult form. For example, if you are taking up muscular dystrophy, it is a disease which cannot be cured by any person. I was also thinking that perhaps all my life I have done nothing because I could not cure even one child of muscular dystrophy. Do you know what is muscular dystrophy? Muscular dystrophy is a disease where muscles are getting affected by XP21. And if it is XP21, you get muscular dystrophy. If you get XQ19, you get Emery-Dreifuss type of muscular dystrophy, and so on. Now the question is how we do it. I went on searching. I wrote my first book telling that I do not know how to cure it. But I collected all information. We collected physiotherapy. We collected homeopathy, everything. And my desire was my first child means the first child which I was looking after. I am an unmarried person, so kindly don't misunderstand me. My first child means the first patient which I was looking, he died. Second died, third died. Almost all the children died and I could not save them. The total number of children is still, we do not know the cure of it, but now with the help of the cow urine, it has become possibility. And also Tulsi ka ras, all those things which are given in our books, they are in a position to set it right. And I have also been doing gene therapy and all those things. My concept was that if you look up the information as given in Vedas, it is extremely wonderful, and that ancient wisdom is to be transferred in actual practice. Now what I would like to say, that if you do almost everything all right, I will give you one example. Everybody said to you, what was told to you? You should have low-fat diet. You should have low-fat diet. Your fiber content should be high and your carbohydrate should be within limits and so on. I found this is not correct because your Z factor should be 0. If you want to live for a longer period, your Z factor should be 0. Try to make it as low as possible. What is Z factor? Z factor is called as BIS factor, and this BIS factor we calculated. How much killing you have done in your life, how much wine you have consumed, and how much anachar you have done it. Anachar means gang rape, stealing somebody's property. You will just say, oh, it is not science. I was also thinking it is not science, but we have measured all these frequencies. We have measured the frequencies. I would like to tell you, you have heard about the very famous experiment recently. It was done in CERN, and it was found that the particle which was emitted there, it is having energy of 125 GeV. 125 GeV, it is called as Higgs boson. It is called as Higgs boson. Higgs is the name of the scientist who gave it theoretically, and later on, after a lot of work, after spending millions and trillions of dollars, we were able to verify in CERN. In physics, it is a very big news. If you do not know it, I think most of you will be knowing it. What I would like to say, the same particle is being emitted by the killing of animals. Same particle is being emitted by the killing of animals. Its name is nociception. And the waves which are coming out of it are called as Einsteinian pain waves. These Einsteinian pain waves are extremely penetrating. They can kill you. They can spoil the whole nation. They can spoil our whole earth. So that is what we have measured and we have calibrated it. And we came to know, my first speculation was that if we kill 10 to the power 48 animals. If you kill 10 to the power 48 animals, you will be able to create 6.5 Richter of earthquake. Do you follow me? How do I get it? Now, I would like to take you back to Adbhut Sagar. Adbhut Sagar is a book which was keeping a collection of the Sanskrit writings. And it says, our earth is like this, big earth. And this earth is standing on the horns of the ox. And when ox moves like this, it gets scattered, then the earth creates, there are a lot of earthquakes coming up, and there is a seismicity of the earth increases. Well, this you could not like to believe it in scientific circles, but I came to know this is true. Second thing, the same, I'm translating the Sanskrit writing. It says that when the earthquake comes, many persons die, and those who have done good actions, they are not killed. Their houses are not spoiled. I found this was given in Sanskrit writings, but when I opened Penguin's book on page 18 says that there was a very big earthquake in America and one house was not destroyed, and that was the house of the Christian father who was not killed despite so much seismicity coming up. Now these things, and also we have collected, in fact I have been busy in collecting all kind of information, how much chaos is taking place and how persons are doing gang rape and why they are doing it, what could be the possible reason. My feeling is that if you would like to stop these things, which I call it as BIS processes, you will be able to stop all these four phenomena. These are called as natural calamities in your present day language. I would call these are BIS calamities. BIS calamities means breakdown of integrated system. It originated with our names, Bajaj Ibrahim Singh. Now this subject has become Bisology and Biso Sciences, and it has become so large, it is called as Biso Sciences, Biso Philosophy, Biso Economics, and so on. So if you are concerned about the economy of our country, we find the whole country's economy is going to, is being lost. Why? Because we are busy in killing animals, we are killing ourselves with the help of alcoholic drinks, and we are killing ourselves with the destruction of our culture, which I call it as anachar. Now all those things were calculated. Can you take it, run it please? Now I have got here large number of tables, and we have calculated how it has come, and you will be happy to know that the work I was showing on the table, how the earthquakes come and how you can stop it. And I have also made a prayer to Almighty that I means all of you, your work has resulted in stopping these earthquakes. Kindly do not make use of our work for creating earthquakes, because that is what was done when atomic energy was developed. Now we have got BIS energy in our hand, and this can be easily misused by others. Because the BIS energy, this is the K theory for, can you run it please? No. Now here we have got all the pictures, and this paper was published. Some persons have said that your papers are not published in Refereed Journal. I said they are all published now on the internet and several other places. Several books have come, and latest book I am taking it, and I would like to present to you next time, though I have got only 2 copies, the whole book. Can you run it? Mathematically we have tried to show, chemically also, I am also busy in biophysically to show how the economy can be improved. Economy of the nation. You think that the economy, yes. So, okay sir, thank you very much. And I would like to say, this work has got application in health sciences. It is improving our sociology. It is also improving our cosmology. Thank you very much. As I have yet to go, if you have any question, I will be too happy to answer. Or maybe next time I come after one day. And then, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bajaj. You see, it was a departure from the schedule which is in your hand, because Dr. Bajaj has to catch a train at 3 o'clock. So, if there is a very, very question, something which is bothering you very much, please you may ask, because we have not come here to clap and listen. If you have anything, any comments, any questions, any doubts, please you may ask him. He is in a big hurry, and
Vedadri Maharishi says that natural calamities occur as an accumulation of the wrongs the society is committing.
I think very good. So we have got so many things, and you see, when you say this thing, it becomes a philosophy. But the question is, we have tried to find out that this was true. In fact, in 1827, it was the year very important when our great scientist, you know, what was his name? Poincaré. He says, human activities can affect our climate. Nobody believed on him. Nobody believed on him. Why? Because the evidences were highly elusive. And as soon as the evidences became available, then the concept has been acceptable to us. And I would like to explain to you, I have explained all these experiments in America, Canada, Russia, before telling to you this time. And now I have gone from earthquake, tsunami and all those. We have said that even tsunamis can be stopped. And even tsunamis can be created. We have studied almost everything. And as our friend will tell you, and it is absolutely necessary for us to read the book of life and the book of nature. Don't read merely the books from what others have said it. I mean, they should be read and we should discuss it. If I am wrong, please do tell me, because anything wrong I do, it will affect first me, then you. Because wrong things will never help us. So we are interested in doing. If there are any other...
We will run short of time. Thank you very much, Professor Bajaj. Thank you very much indeed. I think we have the first speaker. Dennis, are you ready? Dennis, are you ready? Are you ready? Just a minute. I take this time to say a few things. In the meantime, can we make sure that Dr. Vinay is here? Vinay is here. And then Dr. Prasad is here? Dr. Prasad? Sure. And then we have Nalini Ranjan. Is she here? She may be coming after lunch. So anyway, we have 5 more speakers and we have just 90 minutes. And let me tell you one thing, very politely, that if you go to London University or Toronto or New York, anywhere else, they do not give you even a second more than decided. So please, if you are reading your paper, then I will give you a hint 3 minutes before 15 minutes, and you please wind up within 15 minutes so that we can call the other speaker. Don't mind it. We have to learn discipline and respecting time from foreigners. I have learned it myself. So our humble request, Dr. Upadhyay is with me. Our humble request to you is, please respect and do not exceed your time limit, which we have decided as 15 minutes. Yes. And please do not mind I will just do like this. That means another just 3 minutes more. Please wind up within 3 minutes. So, our Russian friend, are you ready, Dennis? Or shall we call some other person? I think we have Dr. Deepak Anand ready. Are you ready? Dennis, I just ask him. Are you ready? Okay, fine. We have a Russian friend here. Now let me tell you one thing. He is going to speak in Russian because his English is also not very good. He doesn't know Hindi, he doesn't know English. So please bear with him, and he will give his presentation through slides which are in English. Right? So I don't think there will be any time for any questions because he won't understand your questions. That is the tragedy. But anyway, our friend, we have Atithi Devo Bhav, and we treat him. Dennis, you can begin now.
Okay. My name is Denis Kleshev. I'm from Russia, and my report named Vedic Wisdom and Structural Harmony of Systems. Okay. Русский санскритолог Владимир Топоров говорил, что древние религиозные тексты содержат особый тип пространственно-временной структуры. Эта структура, this is true, соединяет в одной точке, contains in one punct, или в одном образе мифологического пространства image of mythology space. Самые разные идеи, возникающие на протяжении различных исторических эпох. Действительно, мудрецы древности не интересовались описанием изменчивой реальности. Они стремились выразить универсальные законы, которые выполняются всегда и не зависят от времени, в котором мы живем. Поэтому ведическая культура в наши дни сохраняет огромный познавательный и творческий потенциал. Исторические эпохи модифицируют только наши интерпретации мифа. Люди создают различные религиозные и философские системы, строят, разрушают цивилизации и меняются научные парадигмы. Scientific paradigm is change. Однако религиозные мифы живут в нашем мире и сохраняют большой, потенциал. Лауреат Нобелевской премии физик Юджин Вигнер говорил, что по причине возрастания энтропии получаемая нами информация в более получаемая нами информация на более поздних этапах имеет гораздо больше важных элементов. На более позднем этапе, in modern world, она имеет довольно мало, на самом деле, конкретной информации. Okay. Американский математик и физик Фритьёф Капра сумел показать в своей книге Tao of Physics, что постулаты современной квантовой теории совпадают с теорией даосизма. Однако Фритьёф Капра не нашел путь решения главной задачи, которую сформулировал физик Дэвид Боум. Перейти от вероятностного описания реальности к описанию всеобщей структуры движения, в том числе структуры движения информации в человеческом интеллекте. In human intellect. В древнем мире любые математические знания облекались в форму мифа. Мы находим в Ригведе, in Rigveda, to beginning the Chinese book of change and Plato's cosmology, and very offer ideas. In Vedic, в ведических образах Yama and Yami contains the theory of number even odd. Эта теория в ведическом и древнем греческом мире имела очень большое значение. It is Plato's Timeo, world soul, душа мирового космического пространства. Which is the sum 1, 2, 3, 4 and 8, 9 and 2 to 7. Yes. So we sum число 108, it's a sacred number of Brahma, Rudra number in Buddhism, yes, and Kalima, and а также в других религиозных традициях. Значит, еще я хочу сказать, что из идеи, из Ригведы, from Rigveda begin the theory of element, yes, earth, flame, air, water, ether. It is Platonic solids. No, back. Ведический бог Варуна соединяет в бесконечном пределе ширину и глубину пространства, удерживая вершину мирового дерева. Любой математик, имеющий образное мышление, увидит здесь аналогию с двумя осями координат и общей точкой. Начальное представление аналитического метода Рене Декарта. Analytical method of René Descartes. Причем ведический змей всех речных глубин Ахи-Бунхья, уничтожающий все сущее, совпадает с ментальным образом числа 0. Ахи-Бунхья is zero in modern mathematics. Возникает вопрос, почему этические, научные и религиозные представления могут совпадать в одной точке мифологического пространства? Что объединяет математические, физические, биологические и многие другие науки. Оказывается, их объединяет гармония. Этимология слова «гармония» связана с индоевропейским корнем «тхар». И в русском языке я хочу сказать, что глагол «держать», «держать» имеет такое же значение, как санскритский глагол «тхар». Мы можем сказать, что гармония – это то, что поддерживает существование многообразия Вселенной. Dharma is exist of all world. По сути дела, гармония – это и есть математический синоним понятия дхарма. В 17 веке Иоганн Кеплер описал движение планет и изложил их в трактате «Гармония Вселенной», «Гармония Мунди». Он исследовал средние орбиты планет и создал наглядную модель планетарной системы, Солнечной системы. В этой модели планета Земля, Earth, была связана с фигурой додекаэдра. It's Earth in cosmical cycles. The solar calendar contains 365 дней и 12 sides and 30 edges. Это дни недели и месяца, которые в современном мире используются практически во всех солнечных календарях. Next. Известно, что число 108 является сакральным числом всех восточных религиозно-философских учений. Угол 180 градусов, угол 108 градусов, образуется при построении геометрической фигуры пентаграмма. Пентаграмм, 108 градусов. 108 градусов. Эти и другие числа, связанные с гармонией, мы повсюду встречаем в природе. Например, угол 108 градусов образует молекула воды. It's water, H2O, H2O. We constantly meet numbers of harmony, phi, number phi, or phi capital, or Fibonacci spirals in nature and humans art. Next. Structural harmony in the nature. It's number phi, or golden ratio. Здесь мы видим различные природные объекты. Звезда морская, раковина, цветок розы, это подсолнух, это целя, это клетка эмбриона, это салат, это flower. В растительном мире мы также встречаем число фи. Next. Harmony in proportions of a human, it's number phi. It's a rhythm of heartly heart, как мы здесь видим, число фи соответствует длине между промежутками малых интервалов. It's human hand, hand. Number phi. It's golden ratio or golden section contains in very over objects. It's in architecture, yes, Taj Mahal, yes, and Russian church, yes. In space and fractals, we meet the Fibonacci spirals, yes, and Galactica have a form the Fibonacci spirals, yes. Профессор Алексей Стахов доказал, что с учетом симметрии движения самая оптимальная система мер задается параметрами числа φ. Yes, it's Professor Alexei Stakhov. Professor Alexei Stakhov has proved that Fibonacci algorithms are an optimum system of mensurers. Evolution of all difficult systems aspired in mathematics of harmony. It's book of Professor Stakhov, The Mathematics of Harmony, assisted by Scott Olson in Canada, publishing World Scientific. Professor Alexei Stakhov has patented theoretical bias of stable microprocessors is in computer, yes? No, back. Working on a Bergman's notation and Stachov's algorithms. Okay, next. Как показал Сергей, математическая гармония имеет огромное значение в биологии и генетике. Профессор Петухов обнаружил связь генетического кода с матрицами Адамара и создал математический аппарат для описания структуры ДНК. Лауреат Нобелевской премии профессор Джакоб, Nobel Prize winner, говорил, что китайская книга перемен является языком генетики. Is Chinese Book of Change. It is lingua of genetic structure. Yes, it's triplets of nucleotide. Yes, in DNA structure. And Professor John Claude Perez has found in nuclear structure of DNA the resonances dividing DNA molecular on Fibonacci numbers. Okay, next. Okay, it's no back. Okay, it's Professor Sergei Yakushko. Has shown what the structure of chemical elements in Mendeleev stable is a match of inverse Fibonacci numbers. Its chemical elements, yes, and this is inverse Fibonacci line 1 1 1 1 1 2 1 3 1 4. And другие. Yes, it's Fibonacci line. Okay, next. Professor Eduard Soroco has explained occurrence of stable structures. Entropy in ideal thermodynamic system does not decrease and does not increase. It's formal of Eduard Soroco. Root of this equation is number 3 little, or a set of conditions in the thermodynamical system which are constant entropy with formula, it's constant entropy. Next. Okay. Russian scientist Vladimir Vernadsky studied a phenomenon of biological time. Biological time is connected to the period of population doubling. Yes, population doubling, what conducts to ancient triangle ancient. It's mathematics of Pingala and Pascal triangle. Yes, Pascal's triangle. The sum of number in each button lines is more doublet. 1, 2, 5, and 4, and over. Okay. In the book of Indian mathematics, Pingala contains the most ancient mention of Fibonacci numbers. Fibonacci binary system, binomial coefficients, and the Pascal triangle, or sacred pyramid Mahatra Meru. Mahatra Meru, it's triangle. Yes. Russian Sanskritist Mikhail Mikhailov has proved that Vedic text can be read with the help of mathematical and astronomical Pingala's code. Okay? So, mathematical harmony is Vedic dharma, keeping existence of all known structures in universe. Ignoring of dharma results to the crisis in any thermodynamical system. And a modern science, it is necessary to concentrate on achievement of harmony. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Let us give him a big hand once again. If I could explain in 1.5 minutes what he said was in Indian context, because we don't understand, sorry. I hope you can still hear me. You see, this whole world is harmony. Whether it is physics or biology or mathematics or astronomy or astrophysics or whatever. Harmony of what? That $1 million question which Nachiketa asked, as we heard in the morning, and Yam replied in quarter of a sentence. And the whole Kathopanishad is an explanation of that quarter of a sentence. I need not remind you because you are all scholars of Sanskrit. Sarve Veda Yat Padamamananti, and he ends up with Om Ityetad. I have read a book by a German jazz musician. He is saying it is all the vibrations of Om. And what I wanted to know from Yam was what is the ultimate truth of this world outside that we see and the vast unexplored world within us. 1 quarter of a sentence, Yam replied, Om Ityetad. And the rest of the Upanishad explains the characteristics of Om. Ano Raniyan, Mahto Mahiyan, Tadejati, Tannejati, and all things. I think the essence of Dennis's lecture was also this universal harmony of Om, the A, U and Ma. A is the origin of sound, U is the rolling forward, and Ma is the closing lip sound. So this A, U, Ma, it encompasses the whole universe, all the functions, all mathematics, all sciences in this universe, they are encompassed in this universal sound, monosyllable Om. Once again, thank you very much, Dennis. And now I have the pleasure of inviting, instead of, as you have seen in the printed program, Dr. John J. Kahneman is not here, but his co-author, Dr. Deepak Anand, will be presenting the same paper. Dr. Deepak Anand is an assistant professor in the Department of Management Studies at Shri Satya Sai Institute of Higher Learning, Prashanti Nilayam, Anantapur District, Andhra Pradesh. Dr. Deepak Anand.
Thank you very much, sir.
15 minutes.
So this is not counted, sir. 1 minute extra.
Actually, Mr. Deepak has come instead of Mr.
John Kinnaman.
I said it. I said
Yes.
it. I said it.
As you are all aware, first of all, my humble pranams to the one God inside all of us, and offer my pranams at Bhagwan's lotus feet. Dear sisters and brothers, as sir has already told, I am not the right person to be presenting this particular paper. The original co-author, along with me, John Kinnaman, sir, he has been visiting Puttaparthi, Prashanti Nilayam, Sat Sai Baba's ashram for a number of years, where I am teaching in the Department of Finance. So all my degrees from my MCom to ICWA to my MBA and my PhD have been in the area of finance. But because Mr. John Kinnaman is such an hard worker, such an driving force, when I spoke to him, I got interested in this area. For this paper we're writing together. So thank you very much, sir, for the opportunity. Yes. Yeah, next. Well, first of all, let me start with a basic definition, which says that ecological literacy. We may be from different areas, learning Sanskrit, learning mathematics, learning all the sciences, but we have to today learn about ecological literacy for the reason that if that is not done, all these sciences will come to a no, will come to a zero, for the reason that if everything goes down the ocean, if everything evaporates, you and I don't exist, all our sciences go along with us. That is why it is very important. It should be a part of every science, every form of knowledge. It should be a part of every system of education. How it started, this particular program of ELL, Ecological Literacy Leadership, how it started was at the University of Colorado. This particular course on ecological sciences was not offered. The students themselves came forward and said, along with to Professor Vijay Gupta, one of the sponsors for this particular conference, that we would like to have this particular course, sir. And he took it. And thereafter it evolved into many students asking for a better sustainability education. Yeah. So led by Dr. John J. Kinnaman, we are trying to develop a program of ecological literacy leadership called ELL. Next. So what is the aim? The ELL is basically to give us an holistic view of that oneness with nature and God in a new scientific, cultural and ethical integration. Unless we integrate, we will not be able to grasp. Because in every science we find there are some gaps, something is missing. Unless we integrate ourselves and along with us, along with the nature and the presence of God within us and all omnipresent, we would not be able to really grasp the entire system in one go. So it is Western science basically has separated itself of the observer from the observed. It has said reality is made of things and they follow laws that we are all aware. Universe is a mechanism. It is mechanistic in nature. The mind-body connection has therefore been weakened or lost. So the Western-derived science has been a progression from holoism, that oneness, to mechanism, to a mechanistic view that we all know about. Yes. So we draw upon the most ancient human traditions in this particular program, which is based upon the concept of holoism between material and non-material aspects of reality. Yes. So in the holoism, how it was lost from the origin, how we came to a mechanistic view is with a simple, that machines are made, but that is why we say the mechanistic view also is not complete, it's not arguable, it can be denied for the reason that if something is mechanistic, it has to be made by somebody. If it is made by somebody, there has to be a maker. In fact, there is a small anecdote about Albert Einstein. He once made a particular model of the solar system. And then somebody came and said, from where this beautiful model came? He said, no, morning I got up, it just came on of its own. Nobody made it. He said, how can there be something which is made without a maker? He said, the whole universe, that person who came to him was an atheist. He said, if you believe that the whole universal system and all of us have come, that mechanism has come without a maker, then why can't this small solar system also come without any maker? The point he was driving at is that we have to believe that if there is a system, there is a mechanism, there has to be a maker behind it, without which it cannot possibly exist. So we have a really ingrained incompleteness in the mathematics of the mechanistic view of life. Yeah. So now that the world is trying to awaken itself to the reality, or the reason that now the spaceship Earth is sinking, and we know that unless we do some actions, we will not be able to. Many researchers now point towards a particular fact that if man has to survive 21st century, it's going to be a miracle only that will survive, make humanity survive. Otherwise, 99% research says, like dinosaurs, Earth can exist, solar systems will exist, Milky Way will exist, the whole cosmos will exist with or without man. We're not indispensable. So if you look at the ecological problem, we wanted prosperity here. Yes, we have got that, but at what cost is the question that we have to ask. At a very heavy cost. So can we really understand prosperity? This is a particular beautiful small video. The video doesn't play because the quick player is not there, so we can't play it. But really shows that how from the beginning of time, when humanity started becoming civilized and started doing agriculture, living in pockets of colonies or villages, at that point in time, how the Indian society was the only one in the world which lived in total consonance, in total agreement with nature, and was able to best make use of nature for its own benefit and progress. And progress, as we have in the previous paper also seen from a Russian friend, how humanity has been able to and this was basically happening in India. So unfortunately, it shows a history of land use since 8000 BC and shows that India has had the most intensive relation with the landscape anywhere in the world. At the time when Europe was still in primitive people living in caves, the humanity in India was developed and progressing and working on various aspects of science. Yes, that is what it shows, but the video is not working. Yes? So what is the basic focus? Our focus is very simple. We have to look at the roots of the problem in the scientific, cultural, ethical thinking, differences through the history and civilizations and between East and West. We have to come to a common understanding. Only then we can find solutions. Yes. So now at this point in time, with a sinking ship called Spaceship Earth, we are readily and more poised towards understanding these problems that we are not basically, it is not possible to explain the parts as parts. We have to understand the whole to be able to understand what the parts mean. And that is what the attempt is. Yes. Right. So we have to discover our common wholeness. And also we would like to see where were this particular wholesomeness coming from, where this holism principles were coming from. Can we go back to the roots of India? And whatever the historical books have been telling us about the history of India and the invasion of the Europeans into the northern side of India and Dravidians going back to the southern states. I come from Andhra Pradesh. The black-skinned people moving one side, the fair-skinned people. I mean, we have to really challenge this from the scientific historical perspective also and see, was this knowledge that is being today being looked into so deeply by everybody in the world as a source of or the panacea for all solutions, was it originally Indian or was it borrowed from somebody else? And our facts and findings, Dr. Kinnaman is also a GIS man. As I'll show you some of the pictures from the satellites to show how this whole, what we are talking about in Vedas, is actually scientifically provable to be true. Yeah. So Vedic wholeness, the fifth essence is what the science talks about, something which is unexplained, an angle which is unexplored, a science which is not inexplicable. The fifth essence. So many Westerners have also talked about fifth essence. They have done a lot of work, research on that. So I'll give you a glimpse of the next 5-6 slides. Move very fast on them. So we have a lot of work done by a number of great scholars. Yes, next. You can just have a look at the Greek philosophers. The fifth essence, vital impetus, vital force, explanation of life. Yes. The fifth essence as the ether, also spelled either in the enlightenment of science. The fifth essence during the Enlightenment, and the people who have worked on this talked about the 0-point energy, the dark energy, inexplicably by science, but talking about that if our mathematical equations have to balance, we have to put an unknown error term to it, only then it can happen. And we have, Westerners have explored. Yes, next. Right, next. Right, next. So basically what we are all, the West and the East today, is trying to integrate itself to find our common roots. This is what we have to do today. Right? Vedic and extending back to the earliest civilizations on earth. And we look at those civilizations in a brief moment from now. The Vedic concept of wholeness was preserved for millennia and passed on by century to century, mouth to mouth, to the Vedic scholars. and then began to dissolve around 500 BC. And it's important for the history of science to be able to rediscover those roots. Yeah. So one of the, as I mentioned to you, that some of the theories have been that, this knowledge came from outside India. It is not true. No references in Rig Veda, the earliest written document, to any prior invasion from the north or elsewhere. You look at the Pashupati seal of Shiva, 2600 BC. The Vashishta head of bronze head found near Delhi, 3700 BC. And astronomical calculation of celestial reference in Rig Veda date to 4000 BC, and would have been at least around 6000 BC that the facts have been existing since that point in time. Yeah. That means the evidence which is pointing to, which I will also present to you, is all pointing towards that there is a continuous, unbroken civilization in the Indus Valley since 8000 BC. And Vedanta is arguably the oldest known philosophy, predating Greek philosophy and Abrahamic religions by 2 to 4 millennia. It is the likely source of all this. So if we really, source of all the other religions, if we really look at the origins, the Stone Age, the Mehergarh culture, I'll show you some photographs of that, the Indus Valley civilization, the late Harappan culture, the Vedic period. So basically, if you're looking at this particular period, there is this particular Mehergarh culture, which is dating much backward. And if you know the excavations are bringing out and satellite pictures are bringing out the reality of this. So we'll look at that. Next. The Vedic origin in Indus Valley. So this was the region that we're talking about. And this is the region that we're talking about where the Mehergarh culture is now being excavated in Balochistan and Pakistan. Yes, next. So this is Mehergarh, 7000 BC to this thing. And look at the satellites. Yes, next. And look at satellite images of the Saraswati river, which has now become extinct or gone underground, as being there. And you look at the references to the Saraswati river in the Indian Vedas, in the Rig Veda. Next. So interpretation of this, all these studies which I am presenting, there are maybe around 100 slides. I am presenting only on 25 slides. So which basically is pointing towards only one particular fact. That 7000 to 5000 BC, we had a thriving culture on the Saraswati, Ghaggar, Hakra and Nara rivers. Flooding forced gradual relocation inland from these particular river basins to Saraswati, Indus and probably the Nile. The Vedic culture spread. By this particular flooding, the Vedic culture spread. And sites were abandoned and resettled. Saraswati river dried from the tectonic changes in 1900 BC. And more than 300 archaeological sites along Saraswati river suggest thriving Indus Saraswati culture back to at least 7000 BC. So we can all feel like proud Indians, that we have, as the Britishers, Westerners made us believe that, all your Indian culture that you have with you is from some people who invaded you and settled down in northern India, is actually not true. It is our own original Indian culture. So I'll be ending the last 2 slides here, that if you have to integrate what we have as our own roots, our own culture, our own Indian culture, then we have to have an integration. If you want to really have the perfect right knowledge, that is your bhakta, the right principles, you have to integrate science and policy. Right? The right principles will emerge only from integration of science and policy. If you really want to have the right knowledge, or the jnana as you call it, you have to integrate policy and ethics. And if you really want to have the right action, by right policy, you have to integrate science and ethics. So next slide, I will just summarize very briefly that what we also talk about in our institute is a process of educare that is growing from within. A child in the womb of a mother grows from within. That is why he's able to become healthy and grow further when he comes out into the wide world. A flower cannot be assembled together mechanistically. You can assemble a car mechanistically. I go on TVS factory, assembly line, 2 minutes time, one motorcycle emerges because mechanism is that which puts things together. But a flower which is a blade of grass which has to become and come out in complete beauty, Purnamada, Purnamidam, Punat Purnamidachite, that has to really happen from within, and that is that we have to balance our body, mind and Atma together. Thank you very much. Next slide. Is there any question? Then we can take up. Any comments or questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Before I invite you for questions, because that is a must. My talking is meaningless unless you are satisfied and happy. But I must make two comments on this. One is a little bit of correction, if you don't mind. I have visited that site. It is near Bhopal, Bhimbetka. Bhimbetka is a site all of you must go. The Australians came and they carbon dated or fluorine dated those rock paintings as 10,000 year BC. That is 12,000 year old. And what are those rock paintings? All the four types of musical instruments have been shown there playing. The people living near that area, they are shown to be playing all the four types of musical instruments. Percussion instruments, string instruments, wind instruments and solid instruments. I have seen those slides, those rock paintings myself. So, a bit of correction. Our civilization is not only 8,000 BC, but 10,000 BC, right in the heart of central India, Bhimbetka. So far as the unity of existence is concerned, I am sure you are aware, all of you are aware of the historical experiment that Professor Jagdish Bose performed on 10th May 1901 at Royal Institution, Friday evening 5:30 p.m. If I get a chance, I'll narrate to you what Dr. Bose did and how he proved experimentally that we are one as existence. And then later on, Alien Aspect and co-workers and then Bell, I don't know whether Dr. Pandey has included my lecture. If I have 15 minutes, if I don't have an opportunity, I'll give my the presidential remarks at the end of this session. Please, any questions or queries? Yes.
Thank you for your nice presentation. Are you sure that the way the internet and other things are influencing us, can we have this type of holistic education in the sense that can we prevent
thank you very much, sir. No, I get your question very well, sir. As sir made me stand corrected, because he has already gone and seen those particular paintings, I would request you to one day, if time permits, come to near Bangalore. There's a place called Anandpur district, Puttaparthi Sat Sai Baba's ashram, and we have education institutions. A child can come for free education at the nursery class and go back with a PhD. We have a value education system really in place where we try to integrate all these three components, and seeing is believing. So I can tell you a lot of theories about it. Time will not permit that, but seeing is believing. If you all want to see, you are most welcome to come to Puttaparthi Sat Sai Baba's ashram, where we have all the universities, schools, colleges, and we can show that to you action, sir. It's my personal invitation to you.
Any other question? Remark? Yeah.
Why the Rigveda lacks any reference to India's early civilization? Why there is not a single reference to the existence of India's early civilization in the Rigveda or in the Vedic literature as a whole? This is my question.
Sir, you have to help me on that, sir.
In fact, let me confess, I have not understood his doubt.
India's early civilization was a reality.
Yes.
Our history, our excavation have proved it.
Oh, I got it. Let me
Rigveda is not referring to that.
Let me try to explain. Let me try to explain as with the permission of Dr. Anand. You see, Swami Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo, they were deadly against this Aryan invasion theory. There were absolutely no invasion, no evidence whatsoever, archaeological or literary or anywhere, where there was an invasion by Aryans into this land. From Kashmir to Kanyakumari, we were one race, we were one civilization, and this is a bloody bullshit which is imposed by these Westerners, because they didn't want to leave India. They said, you are also foreigners, we are also foreigners. Why the hell are you trying to drive us out?
Mention a single word about invasion.
See, Rick, yes.
Why India's very civilization is not found in the literature?
In the Rigveda.
No, you see, you are presuming that Indus Valley civilization was older than the Rigveda. You see, the Vedic, this is Aparushe. Rigveda or the Vedic knowledge is Aparushe. It is eternal. We don't give any time or date to the Rigveda or the Vedic knowledge. It is an accumulation of knowledge. The idea is, as in the morning somebody said, gravitation existed, even Newton's great-grandfather was born before that. So Rig Veda rishis were mantra drashtas. The mantras already existed. They only discovered them. They only realized them. They only saw them. That is why they are called not composers of the Vedas, but they were the seers of the mantras, not the composers of the mantras. Smritis were composed by the rishis, but not Shruti.
Yes.
They are asking about that where is the quotation or something is there in Rig Veda for Indus civilization or something. Actually, this is Veda. It's not. You have to listen. You can't ignore my words or anybody's words. They are all also scholars, and we can't ignore. If it is not mentioned, did you study the Rig Veda? Whole Rig Veda? Are you study? Actually, if you have studied, okay, if you have studied, it's not like that. In that Veda, it's not said that Indus Valley civilization was there. It will goes on. Next civilization comes like that. There is no any quotes. It's not mentioned in there in such a way as you wish like that. It is there somewhere somehow, but we can't able to know. We can't able to extract from those Veda mantras. So that's the problem.
So let me exercise my authority as a chairperson. We are running. We don't want to delay the next session because. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Why 2 minutes? Half a minute.
Perhaps this would be somehow an explanation to your answer, sir, because in the Vedas we have the Gyan Kanda and the Karma Kanda, and they, perhaps if I am not mistaken, the Vedas have not spoken of any civilization. They have spoken of the rituals and the norms, and perhaps that is why there is no reference of the Indus Valley civilization as a whole. Perhaps because of the Gyan Kanda and Karma Kanda, the Vedas have not spoken of any civilization.
What the Vedas are,
said it.
Sir, what the Vedas are basically telling is, in a state of deep.
We'll do it later, please. Yes.
Sir, before you make one comment, only one thing I would like to say is the Vedas basically are when the rishis and sages had the experience of Godhead, of oneness and unity. At that time, what emerges from their heart as an experience comes out. It is not confined to time and space. That is why the reference may not be there, but still everything what they say is held valid.
Sorry, sir.
It is not normal human mind.
Sorry, sir. Gravitation was not a product of Newton's mind. Do you agree with me?
Sir, there are states of consciousness.
It was not a product of Newton's mind. Gravitation existed much before Newton.
I think, sir,
Veda means knowledge, accumulated knowledge. That is called Veda. Ved is knowing. Veda is knowledge. They were compiled by Vyas, as we say.
And classified.
They were not.
One more question.
Sir, we have to go.
Only 1 minute, sir.
No, you have said it 5 times.
If I beg 1 minute, will you not please?
I will have 10 minutes with you after this session is over. We cannot eat into others' time because there is another session at 4:15.
Okay, sir.
Not has been deciphered yet. Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anand. Let me ask whether Nalini Ranjan has come. Nalini Ranjan? She hasn't come. So, I have the pleasure of inviting Dr. P.N. Vinay, School of Humanities, University of Hyderabad, and Exploration for the elements of cell biology in ancient Indian literature. Great.
Yeah, after excellent presentations by my previous speakers, I feel humbled to go into a very mundane subject, cell biology. And I come from Hyderabad. And this paper has been written along with consultation with my supervisor, Dr. Jayasarya Prasad, who is here. And I'm very happy to be presenting it before him and before all the scholars who are present here. So, next. This is actually a part of my PhD thesis. I am actually working on tissue regeneration, concepts of tissue regeneration in Ayurveda. So where do I begin? So I thought that let me first check whether there is an reference, whether there is a reference for cell, stem cell, tissue, how tissue forms, and all these things. Unless I delve into deep into the subject, I would not be able to do this. So this was the premise on which I started, and there is some symbolism in the shloka that is there. I think scholars here would be understanding it. This is actually about atom, and this is also about Sri Krishna. For me, since I am delving into the subject of cell, it symbolizes the cell to me, and I would think the cell is the smallest unit of life. So, what is the cell? It is the fundamental, as the co-chair and the chair would, are scholars in biotechnology. I know that it would be, this is a very rudimentary thing that I am explaining here. The cell is the fundamental unit of life, and it is the basis for study of biosciences. But how did Indians study sciences then? It was basically from, I don't know. It may be they started with material sciences, the Nyaya and Vaisheshika philosophy, and I think that the understanding of material sciences somewhere gave the direction for the understanding of biological sciences. Because Ayurveda has its roots firmly embedded in philosophy, in Nyaya, Vaisheshika and Sankhya. So that is where I start from. Next. So these are the three premises on which I base my paper on. The origin of life on earth, origin of life in the womb, and growth, repair and regeneration taking place in the bodily tissues. So I just made a little search, and there on origin of life on earth I found this from Samaveda. Agni invoked water and announced his desire to it for supporting the bodies of creatures with its latent heat. Agni is the factor for transformation. Agni in Ayurveda is also the factor for transformation. Agni is the factor for all chemical changes. And water was chosen for organizing cell life, as it was easier to split it up, and as the latent heat furnished the energy requirements. Then when I look back into the references of living cell in ancient texts, I found these are the very names. These very names suggested this cell. Bija, Jiva, Jivanu, Jiva Paramanu, Deha Paramanu, and Sharira Paramanu. Paramanu is the atom, as everybody here understands. Sharira Paramanu, Jiva Paramanu, Deha Paramanu are denoting the cell here. Next cell, please. Then what is the cell theory? If we go into Western science, Schleiden and Schwann developed the cell theory. They are credited with the postulation of cell theory. I correct myself and say they are credited. The structural unit called the cell is now known as the unit of life. And the concept that the cell is the basic unit of life is known as cell theory. Warshaw in 1855 extended the cell theory and suggested that an additional feature of cell theory should be that all living cells arise from pre-existing cells. Back. So this one point, all living cells arise from pre-existing cells. That gave me ample scope for my research. Is there a cell? Is it dividing? And this particular point, I just held to it and it gave me some inputs. The next one. Then I just, this is not my subject, but I found out that Maharshi Parashara, and I found this in this particular book. He speaks about plant cell and gives very, very good, almost accurate description of the plant cell. I would be very happy if any scholar could give me the reference of this particular translation in Vriksha Ayurveda. I searched a lot for it, but failed to get the exact reference for this. Next. This is the Paramanu theory. All matter originates from Paramanu. It is a combination of two Paramanus which leads to a molecule formation. And this just refers to the atomic and molecular nature of matter. Next. So then I went back to the origin of life in the womb. So there is cell division taking place. It starts with the bija, the zygote, the first product of fertilization. Bija divides in a specific manner to attain the shape of kalala or a loose clam. This is the reference from Srimad Bhagavatam. I studied, as an Ayurvedic physician, I studied Charaka Samhita and Sushruta Samhita. But when my supervisor pointed out Srimad Bhagavatam to me, I discovered a lot of embryology in Srimad Bhagavatam, which I thought I will make use of for my research. So this is an exact, fertilization and cell division come into picture. Kalalam tu eka ratrena, pancharatrena budbudam. Dashahena tu karkundha, peshi andam tu chatapuram. Chataparam, yeah. Correct me if I am wrong. And then zygote at 2-cell stage, at 4-cell stage, at 8-cell stage, it is Kalala. Kalala is there in Ayurveda. Karkandhu is also there in Ayurveda. But the amazing part, it is also there in a Purana called Srimad Bhagavatam. And Charaka said that this, his exact reference quotes this. Bhavata avyakta vyakta vigraha sadasat bhutanga avayavaha. Look at this. The seed has the capability to give rise to all kinds of tissues and organs. What does it mean? It just meant to me embryonic stem cells. What is a stem cell? A cell which can give rise to all sorts of tissues. And that is what Charaka has indirectly referred to here. And how was all this knowledge possible in the absence of imaging technology? So, I think it could be Yogi Pratyaksha, of which we have just had a discussion. It's a little more than intuition is too small a word to describe Yogi Pratyaksha, because English translations usually give the rishis intuition, which I don't agree with. It's too small a word for that. And then it could also be due to the right scientific approach adopted by the rishis, due to their strong grounding in Nyaya and Vaisheshika philosophies. So somewhere the grounding in material sciences gave a methodical approach to biosciences. Next. And the gross and the subtle. In the morning also I was very happy when there was some discussion on Sukshma. What is Sukshma? This Sukshma and Sthula aspects are having, it has immense meaning in Indian context. The subtlety. So the gross body parts and the subtle body parts, which Charaka described with authority. Sushruta described Sukshmata with authority. So these could be what are the Sukshma things? That which could not be seen through the Indriyas, which are Atindriya. So maybe they indicated the microscopic things. And again I should say, go back to Yogi Pratyaksha to give an explanation for that. Then Paramanu is eternal and intangible. The Darshanas, especially Nyaya and Vaisheshika, describe Paramanu as the Karana Dravya. We cannot go back we cannot do any research in our sciences unless we go to the fundamentals. And Paramanu is the fundamental thing that has to be understood to understand cell. It was the finest entity that cannot be produced but which evolved all other substances. The next. This again gave me a lot of inputs. Pilupakavada and Pitharapakavada. Vaisheshika's Pilupakavada speaks of the complete dissociation of compounds to the atomic stage during transformation in the presence of Agni. Look at the importance of Agni here. Again, it's a chemical reaction. No doubt it's a chemical reaction. And the transformation, complete transformation and the combination to form a new product. Pitharapakavada is like a physical change which can be reversed. So, physical and chemical changes were perhaps described for the first time. So how do we apply the concept of Paramanu to biosciences? The minute nature of atom was applied to biosciences also by Charaka himself. In Ashtanga Sangraha also Charaka himself tells you that the organs of the body, going by the Paramanu, Sharir Avyavastu, Paramanu Bhedena, Apari Sankhya Bhavati, Ati Bahutvad, Ati Saukshmyad, Atindriyatva, Tesham Samyoga Vibhage, Paramanunam Karanam, Karma Sambhavascha. So he says that by Paramanu Bheda it is innumerable, they can be understood only on the basis of buddhi. They are so minute that they cannot be observed with the naked eye. The association and dissociation of these cells is due to Vayu, Karma and Swabhava. Organ formation, then cell division that started with Kalala progresses to cell differentiation and organ formation. The cell division could lead to differentiation of different tissues and organ formation. That indicates, these are the interpretations that I have given. If it could go to organ formation, it just indicates embryonic stem cell activity. Next. Tissue and organ formation in Srimad Bhagavatam have been given so beautifully. He says, in the course of a month, a head is formed. At the end of 2 months, hands, feet, and other limbs take shape. By the end of 3 months, the nails, fingers, toes, body hair, bones, and skin appear. As the organs of generation and the other apertures in the body, namely the eyes, nostrils, ears, mouth, and anus. Within 4 months from the date of conception, the 7 essential ingredients, tissues, namely chyle. Ayurveda has 7 tissues. Chyle, blood, flesh, rasa, rakta, mansa, meda, asti, majja, shukra. These are the tissues that are formed, that come into existence in the 4th month itself. So, somewhere I could get so much input from a non-medical scripture. Next. So, Ashtanga Sangraha also, based on a 6th century AD book, writes on the smallest living unit. It refers to it as Paramanus. All the organs are made up of Paramanus. Union and division of the Paramanus is brought about by Vayu, influenced and activated by actions of past lives. For me, the past life here, I interpret it as the genetic, over which we have no control. Yeah, next. This is the interpretation that I have given. Deha Paramanu is the smallest living unit. They are capable of division. These are all that I have learned from this. Cells divide and differentiate into tissues and organs. So it just indicates the activity of stem cells. Factors for growth and differentiation are Vayu. Vata is the factor for circulation and transportation. And so it is the extrinsic factor for the growth and differentiation of organs. And it is intrinsic factor for this is the action of past lives or genetic, over which we have no control. The next. And these are the 3 nyayas in Ayurveda that have been described for tissue nutrition or formation. Kshira Dadi Nyaya, Khale Kapota Nyaya, Kedara Kulya Nyaya. They are self-explanatory. Next. Yeah. And these are the terms for tissue formation, the states of tissue formation. The body, just now we heard about harmony. The body always tries to bring itself into harmony. Like all our energies, the body is directed towards bringing about harmony. And that harmony is the status of homeostasis. Next. Adult stem cell concept. Yeah, in case of injury, disease and aging, is there an adult stem cell concept? We discussed only the embryonic stem cell concept. It is there. Again, Charaka has not described sthayi and asthayi components of dhatu formation. Dhatu is tissue here. But the Vyakhyakarras or the commentators have described sthayi dhatu is the precursor to asthayi dhatu. And there is this is being reinterpreted as adult stem cell. And it has an Next. Over. Next. So this is the summary. This is the smallest living unit, as I said, and cell repair, and this knowledge of the cell is so important to understanding regeneration. And I would just like to close with, we feel that regenerative medicine is simply tissue cell engineering. Why can't there be an alternative approach? Can the natural stem cells in our body be stimulated by certain herbs or medicines? Is it not cheaper, economical? So this is how, if we, the utility of this science for today's world. So this is where, this is just a baby step in that direction. Thank you very much. And thank the organizers.
Thank you. Please, yeah. You have to face questions. There may be, just a moment. Let me make a couple of remarks that might stimulate some of you to ask more questions. You see, you very rightly said that cell is the foundational unit of life.
Yeah.
I agree. But have you heard of the double slit experiment? How do you differentiate between life and consciousness?
No, I haven't.
You haven't.
Yeah.
But there is no difference between life and consciousness. You see, consciousness is more primary than life. And consciousness was experimentally demonstrated by physicists in the double slit experiment. An electron, which was a beta particle of a radioactive disintegration, was shown to be conscious of whether the scientist has closed it will be observed after passing through both the slits, or it will not be observed after passing through both the slits. This is the usual double slit experiment. If I have the opportunity, I will love to explain to you that it is consciousness which is more primary than the cell. And secondly, you see, what we observe as particle, and you see, you have only gone up to the atom. You see, there is a whole world beyond, smaller than the atom. We call them fundamental particles. There are as many as 200 so-called fundamental particles, much smaller than the atoms. And all of them have been proved to be conscious. How do you explain that? So we have already explained, somebody was talking about Advait Vedant. The Vedantic theory is still not been challenged by any of the experiments of modern physics, including the discovery of the Higgs boson. Again, I have to say that because of shortage of time, I don't have time to explain all these things, but I can do it, because I have taught structure of matter for 40 years in the University of Delhi. And I try to compare that with the Vedantic wisdom that we have in our Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedas. So that is a wonderful, experiment that you have been doing, but you have been doing at a little grosser level. There is a still more subtle level. And Schrödinger, as somebody has mentioned here, he says in this famous Cambridge University lectures that consciousness is a singular of which the plural is not known. Any questions, please? Yes.
Yes.
See, the word Paramanu itself is explaining well. It says self-explanatory.
Yeah.
It's smaller than the atom.
Yeah.
Anu is an atom. Paramanu smaller. Even nowadays, as Professor was telling, that energy particle itself is composed of formative dust particle, which is the first output in the transformation of the absolute divine into action state. That is a real causal body. Causal body. That are not causal body, that is a pranav sarir. That only again on association becomes Paramanu. Paramanu again combines to form atoms.
Thank you.
That is not a question, that is an observation. Any other observation? Or we proceed? Oh yes, you raised your hand.
First, thank you Dr. Vinaya for your very good work, I think, in trying to get wisdom out of our text. Then I wanted to check with you, you mentioned about the development of the embryo. So does it correlate exactly with modern science or no?
Not exactly. There are some differences. But as far as...
for example, can you give some example of how the difference is there?
The differences, the similarities I'll tell you first. The similarities are, like I said, all the organs are formed by the second month itself, and even now the heartbeat, earlier which was detected in the 4th month, now sonography detects it at 6 weeks. So these are certain things. The differences, there are certain things like, the mother having 2 hearts in Dauhrada stage in the 8th month, which modern science may not agree with. And there are other kinds of, and there is the fundamental difference is Chetana Shakti that goes along with conception, along with the sperm and the ovum. It is the Chetana Shakti that gives life, and that is what creates life, which is completely absent in modern medicine. This is the main thing, I feel.
So is it true that the Chetana Shakti is said to have come from the semen rather than from the ovum?
No,
is that so?
It's not like that. It's a totally different thing which enters at the time of conception. That's what Sushruta tells you.
I see.
He has done a lot of work on embryology, and he tells you that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Our next speaker is Dr. Prasad.
I think he wanted to ask me a question, sir.
Dr. Prasad is from the Department of Sanskrit Studies, School of Humanities, University of Hyderabad, India. His topic is Botanical Science in Sanskrit Literature, exploring its contemporary relevance. Dr. Prasad. Are you ready with your slides? 1 minute. Half a minute. Okay. So I can take his half a minute. In Sanskrit literature, we have botanical sciences. You see, in Ramcharitmanas, when Bali, Sugriv tells should go and look for in such and such areas, and when you will pass such and such areas, you will find such and such types of trees and fruit, sustainable. Then Sugriv have all this knowledge. He said, look, when I was very scared of my brother Bali, so I was running and running to save my life. That is how I toured the whole of India. So Goswami Tulsidas has described the botanical empire of the entire India and how Sugriv describes all those botanical things. Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. Jnananandamayan devam nirmalasphadikakritim adharam sarva vidyanam hayagrivam upasmahe. A very good evening to the distinguished scholars assembled here and other friends. First of all, let me sincerely confess that I am not a plant scientist nor an Ayurvedic expert, but I am a simple Sanskritist trying to explore the scientific insights that are stored in the Sanskrit literature. Basically, in our department, we are trying to investigate such concepts which make a kind of interface studies in this direction. So we have two wings. Number one is natural language processing. Based on Bhandini's Ashtadhyayi Sanskrit grammar, the machine translation systems are being developed. Further, we are also working in Ayurveda, how in modern times Ayurveda is relevant. So that is how you can see Dr. Vinaya just now she has presented. Dr. Vani will be presenting her talk later. I will start the presentation with this small brief introduction. Sanskrit literature has innumerable scientific insights that can be classified under several scientific disciplines. Why could I state this is, there is mathematics, there is chemistry, there is physics, there is medicine, whatnot. Everything is there. The only thing is, we have to explore. There is only need of the hour. Partially some work has been done for the last 3 to 4 decades in India, and Dr. Bhajananath Seal, Dr. O.P. Jaggi, and many other scholars have put in some good efforts to write some good material in this direction. But still, lot of things need to be done to explore more of the scientific insights that are stored in the Sanskrit treasure house. And one of them is botanical science. Though there is no single text that describes the plant anatomy, physiology, morphology, and related concepts, texts like Vriksha Ayurveda. Vriksha Ayurveda is written by Parashara, Surapala, and maybe some more unknown authors, because in Sanskrit manuscripts we don't find their biography and other details at the colophon area, so that some are non-attributed. So we have considered here Parashara's Vriksha Ayurveda only. At Mahabharata, for example, in Shanti Parva, lot of things have been told about the cognitive senses of the plants, which I will present later. And this is a mantra from Chandogya Upanishad I have taken. The earth is the essence of all beings. This is Sanskrit saying for that. Yesham bhutanam prithvi rasaha. Rasa is the essence. Yesham bhutanam. Kautilya also says this. Manushyanam vrittihi ardhaha. Manushyavati bhumihi ityardha. Bhumi consists manusyas. So that Yesham bhutanam prithvi rasaha. This is the translation. The earth is the essence of all beings. And now comes the water. Prithivyaha apo rasaha. Water is the essence of the earth. If you believe in Hindu mythology, when there is no creation, entire Brahmandam is actually floating in the waters. That is how it has a greater significance. And apa maushadhaya rasaha. What is the essence of the water? Aushadhis. Aushadhis are basically they wither away, they perish after ripening the fruits. These are called aushadhis, not simple medicines, what we use in the local language. Yes. Man is the essence of the herbs. Ultimately, this is what? Herbs have a greater significance in human life. Like in the food chain, we can see. Vegetarians, they take directly the aushadhis. Non-vegetarians also indirectly they are depending on Aushadhis itself. Why? Because sometimes there are some meat eaters. The animals, they again eat the plants only. That is how plants are helping the entire humankind to produce a necessary food and all. Aushadhinam rasaha. Now, if we come to the ontological perspective of these plants, there is some classification according to Ayurveda and Vriksha-Ayurveda also. This according to Charaka and Sushrata Samhitas, the life form is twofold. Is Thavara and Jangama. Thavaras are the immobile things, Jangamas are the mobile things. Further, the plants come under the first category. That is very clear for us. 1 minute, please go back. Second thing is humans and animals comes under second. This is how the basic categorization have been done in the Ayurveda. Yeah. Now, if we come to the Thavara category, there are 4 again further classifications: Vanaspati, Vanaspatya, Virud and Aushadhi. So Vanaspatis are the trees which bear fruit without flowers, jackfruit, etc. Even Udumbara, Fiscus, I don't know the botanical name, I'm sorry. Vanaspatya, trees with fruits and flowers, mango and all. Virud, grass varieties and creepers. Aushadhis, just now seen the image over there, paddy, banana, etc. Because they Vaidharayu after they ripen the fruits. Further, the Jangama category, if you see the second one, again this fourfold: Jaraija, Andaja, Svedaja and Udbhija. So Jara means placenta with membranes. That refers to the humans, animals, wild animals, etc. Now comes the Andaja, the birds, snakes, fish, crocodiles, tortoises. These are what they called Andajas. Now comes the Svedajas, microbes, ants, bedbugs and so on. Udbhijas are the vegetable kingdom. Entire comes under this Udbhija category. That is under the Jangama one. So this is the basic ontological classification of Ayurveda in which the plants occurs. Actually, I am going to another concept called the genesis of a seed. How a seed actually is created. This is shloka taken from Bharadwaja's Vriksha-Ayurveda. Tells us that Apohi kalalam bhutva it pindas thanukam bhavet. 2 words are very prominent here. Kalalam, just now Dr. Vinaya was referring to Kalalam. Kalalam is zygote you have referred, the zygote. And the pindam is the embryo basically here. And tadeva yuhamanatvat, and the transformation process, bijattam adhigacchati, it acquires the form of a bija. That's a seed. So this is the basic classification. The genesis of a seed has been given given in the Vriksha-Ayurveda. We can see the corresponding image. Next. These are the things. Of course, here the zygote is missing. Only embryo is seen there. The process after the zygote is formed has been described in these images. Probably it may be there in some other references, I believe. But here, this certain chemistry, what has been described by Parashara, I am not sure whether this has been done in modern plant scientists. This is what I am putting forth for this submission. Yeah. Now we comes to the Mahabharata, where the cognitive sense of plants has been described very cleverly. Of course, there is a crudeness in the description, but still we can interpret according to the context. This is the shloka and its translation. Ghananam vrikshanam akashoste nasamshayah tesham pushpaphale viktir nityam samupalabhyate. And it is very clear that they have space. Though they are dense in nature, they have space within them. That's what Bhrigu says to Bharadwaja. It is a dialogue between Bhrigu and Bharadwaja in Shantiparva and Mahabharata, where entire description takes place. Yeah, next. If you come to the next one, Ushmate glanaparnana tvakphalam pushpamevacha mlayate cheva shitena sparshastena atra vidyate. Here, among the 5 cognitive senses, sparsha has been highlighted. Sparsha is the touch. They have heat within them. Can you please go down? There is overlapping. Before. Yeah, this one only. You can go down. The text is Anyway, we will try to interpret. Vayavagni Ashtar-nishpeshaihi phala-pushpan vishirate shrotrena gृह्यते shabdah tasmat shunvanti padapaha. Here, the Shravanendriyam is being told here. Tasmat shunvanti padapaha. How did they listen to the sound of wine and fire and thunder? Their fruits and flowers droop away. This is the explanation given by sage Vyasa, for which there is a kind of evidence that plants have these cognitive organs, particularly the Shravanendriyam. And there is a description from Chakrapani, the commentator on Charaka Samhita, who says that Tadha Lavali Meghastanita Shravanatu Phalavati Bhavati. When the Lavali, that is the small, what you call Nellika in Tamil, this is another form of Nellikai. And the Lavali Meghastanita Shravanatu, when it hears about the sound of this thunder, etc., Phalavati Bhavati, it gets the fruits. This is the reason behind that. Otherwise, it's not possible at all. So this can be inferred that they have this kind of particular sense organ. Next one. And if you come to the next one, Valli Veshete Vrikshan Sarvataschaiva Gacchati. Next, Yadushtesa Vargosti. It is the visual organ now being explained here. Now, example given is the sunflower. Chakrapani says that Surya Bhakta is the sunflower here. Yadha Yadha Suryo Bhavati. Surya Bhakta, the sunflower, moves along with the movement of the sun. It goes along with the movement of the sun. That is called Surya Bhakta. Many other synonyms are there. So a creeper winds round a tree and goes about all its sides. I am very sorry that some of the text is actually get cut off and I could not show you the entire translation part, maybe due to the incompatibility problems of the computer. Now comes the next one, that is the Tasma Jighranti Padapaha. If you can see the second line, Tasma Jighranti Padapaha. It is about the cognitive organ, that which can smell. How it smells? Then again, trees recover vigor and put forth flowers in the consequence of odors, good and bad, of the sacred perfume, the diverse kinds of dhupas. Dhupas are used in Vriksha Ayurveda, and it is plain that trees have scent. Yeah, next one. And this is about the Rasanendriya, and they drink water by the roots so that it can be inferred like this. And there is some other discussion on this drinking water through right roots. Next one. And after completing that concept, I am going to the next one, that is consciousness in plants. Normally we see consciousness in humans, but there is some interesting quotation in Manusmriti, Tamasa Bhavarupena Veshata Karma Hetuna, and Antasanya Bhavantede Sukha Dukkha Samanvita. It is more significant in this context. They have pleasure and pain. Being a plant, it experiences more pleasure and pain. And they know all these things. That is what emphasized by Manu in Manusmriti. Yeah, next one. And this is again from Mahabharata. Earlier I have referred from Shanti Parva. Now again from Mahabharata. Grahana Shekudakasta Chanrasa Virohanate Jivam Pashyam Kshalam Achityam Navidyate. Yeah, there is a translation. You can just go through that. Next one. And the suction force theory, once again, I humbly submit that I am not applying sciences. I am just exploring these concepts from Sanskrit perspective. So these two people, Dixon and Jolly, in 1992, have discovered this suction theory. Just to Dr. Vinay also referred to the sap and leaf. I think this kind of concept was not there earlier in modern science until these two people have described something about this. Plants have inherent capacity to draw water through its nalam. There is a sloka, next comes to this. Yeah. And unless we know the capillary action of the plants, we cannot describe how they drink the water. And this is Vaktred Otpalanalena Ethordham Jalamadatet. As one can suck water through a bent lotus stack, trees also with the aid of the wind drink through their roots. This is long back. Mahabharata says this. At least if you believe 5,000 years happened after Mahabharata war, but this is more contemporary, this concept. But until 1892, these two people have described about the suction force theory. Nobody has explored this kind of concept in any science. Yes, next one. Humans have tridoshas, vata, pitta and kapha. Similarly, the plants have vata, pitta and kapha. And naranam vrikshanam vata, pitta, kapha, rujaha sambhavanti nirupyatha kuryat tad dosha nashanam. And there is a translation given by Parashara. Yes, next one. And vata, this is the constitution. Next one. This is the pitta constitution, kapha constitution. And now I come to the last concept, that is binomial nomenclature used in the modern taxonomist. Linnaeus is the inventor of binomial nomenclature, who is a Swedish scientist. Maybe that is happened only in the 18th century. Here, there is one very interesting quote by William Jones, Sir William Jones, who is the author of the Sanskrit Vaughan Williams Dictionary. What he said is, had Linnaeus studied Sanskrit, he would have created more meaningful nomenclature. Here I would like to give some examples why he has quoted like this. Yeah, next one. If you give look at the chemistry of the Surya Bhakta, the sunflower, just the image has been shown. This is the chemistry. Probably some of you may be understanding this. I am zero in this knowledge. I just gave you for your information. Next one. And this distribution is according to Ayurveda. Ayurvedic pharmacopoeia of India is their API. According to this information has been taken. Why I am referring to this is, there is some certain medicinal effect given by the sunflower. Yeah, next one. Okay. In fact, the presentation is a bit incomplete, but I would like to deal on all these concepts, and many more may come in the discussion. The concept of the Rasa Panchaka is the pharmacodynamics of Ayurveda. Unfortunately, nobody has worked on the Rasa Panchaka so far, because Rasa, Guna, Veera, Vipaka and Prabhava, these are the 5 properties. But basically, modern medicine is interested only in the molecular qualities, but whereas this the drug, but whereas Ayurveda has this certain specific concept called Rasa Panchakam, that is pharmacodynamics of Ayurveda, and seedlings of techniques, grafting techniques, ancient Indian gardening, types of land described. There is 3 types of land: Jangala, Anupa and Mishra. Modern medicine, I think modern science don't know this kind of classification that have happened in our ancient literature. Probably who are interested in this subject, they may go through further, explore. There are tons of material available in Sanskrit literature. Only thing is we have to interpret properly at certain context. This is what my hypothesis about the plant science and Sanskrit literature. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prasad. Thank you very much, Dr. Prasad. And with your permission, I have, before I invite questions and comments from the audience, you see, I may narrate an anecdote, and you have provoked me, rather, I must use the word provoked me. So many other speakers have provoked, but I restrained myself. But you have provoked me the most. You see, when you say about the consciousness in the plant kingdom, it is not only in the plant kingdom. As I said earlier, Professor J.C. Bose, he experimentally demonstrated consciousness not only in the plant kingdom, but also in the mineral kingdom. He took 3 samples representing each kingdom. A thin metal sheet representing the mineral kingdom, a vegetable tissue representing the plant kingdom, and animal tissue representing the
I think after arguing, he is tired.
And now he applied identical stress on all the 3. And he recorded their response by an automatic recorder. And he presented those recordings before this audience, which consisted of great scientists from all over the world who were there at the Royal Institution, London on 10th May 1901. And then he challenged them, please tell me which is the response of the animal, which is the response of the vegetable, which is the response of the mineral. Nobody could. Nobody could. And would you like to hear how Bose ended his lecture? Would you like to hear? This is what he said, I quote, I have shown you this evening autographic record of the history of stress and strain on the living and non-living. How similar are the writings? So similar indeed that you cannot tell one apart from the other. Among such phenomena, how can we draw a line of demarcation and say, here the physical ends and there the physiological begins? Such absolute barriers do not exist. It was when I came upon the mute witness of these self-made records and perceived in them one phase of a pervading unity that bears within it all things, the mode that quivers and ripples of light, the teeming life upon our earth, and the radiant suns that shine above us. It was then that I understood, for the first time, a little of that message proclaimed by my ancestors on the banks of the Ganges 30 centuries ago. They who see but one, in all the changing manifoldness of this universe, unto them belongs eternal truth, unto none else, unto none else. That was the point that J.C. Bose experimentally proved. And humanity had to wait for 80 long years for Alain Aspect and co-workers who proved the Bell's theorem experimentally. And then Nicholas Giesing in 1995 again reproved the Bell's theorem. What was that Bell's theorem? What was the double-slit experiment? I will tell you next time. Thank you very much, Dr. Prasad. Now you are invited for any questions from the audience.
Science and our philosophy is to go in parallel to each other. Here, you mentioned about the jackfruit. It's not having flower. It's not correct. It's having flower. Male flower, which is called a catkin, and the female flower, which is developing as fruit. This, those days they cannot understand all these details, but science is coming to our help. So, it has to go together.
Sir, I have an answer. Maybe, yes. What I am trying to say is, earlier you have commented about Anu and Paramanu. With regard to that, I will answer your question. Yeah. Dr. Vinaya has, when presented, you said that Paramanu is an association of Anus. Right? If I followed you correctly. Paramanu is an association of Anus. Paramanu. Okay. Okay. In such a case, Vaishesha Darshanam, the ancient classical physics written by Kanada, says that Anu, Paramanu or Manu, both are actually synonymous. It's synonymous. I studied Vaishesha Darshanam.
Sorry, let me.
I studied Vaishesha Darshanam. Please believe me.
They are not synonymous.
Both are synonymous.
They are not.
One thing, sir. It is again to Sanskrit or modern science are telling. No.
You see?
No. Let me put forth my comment. There you please. Anu, Paramanu, both are synonymous. Number one. Number two. Paramanu is eternal. Paramanu is intangible. That is one thing. And when you dissect the certain substance and until you go where you cannot dissect further, that is what is called as Paramanu, defined by Kanada. But the modern scientists failed. There is electron, neutron, proton, again quark. Tomorrow what comes we don't know. But you have defined it correctly. What is Paramanu?
Paramanu is the ultimate smallest particle. That's a Paramanu. Ultimately smaller.
Okay.
That is the formative dust particle.
Fine. I agree with that. But
Sorry for the intervention. You see, I have been teaching chemistry and structure of matter. Okay? So far as the
I'm proposing translation theory. I'm not saying science.
So far as the accepted translation by the government of India goes, there is a difference between molecule, atom and subatomic particles. These are the three categories. Molecules can be, protein molecules contain thousands of atoms, right? So that is, water molecule contains only 3 atoms. But then comes the atom, hydrogen atom, sodium atom, iron atom, gold atom. And then we have the Paramanu, that is subatomic particles. So Paramanu is subatomic particles. Further, in Sanskrit you can say this is the ultimate particle. Now the ultimate particle is nothing but energy. This is for the convenience, for our convenience, that we have named them as subatomic, atomic, molecule, this and that. Wait a minute. Then comes the Sanskrit version. I came across this book suddenly. Indian Music, Gateway to Salvation, it is published by Sasta Sahitya Mandal. It contains the physics and philosophy of that Paramanu, that is Om. How this whole world came from the sound of Om. How somebody was our Russian friend. He talked about musical notes. How those musical notes originated from the science, physics and philosophy of Om. If anybody is interested, he can have that book from me.
Professor Ramabaram has a comment. Professor Ramabaram.
Hello. See, this word Anu, Paramanu is really confusing. Actually, modern science is concerned, Sir has said something else. What I am telling is, Anu means atom, Paramanu means molecule. And all others are subatom. Yes, Paramanu means molecule. This is, okay. That is how the translation is there. And subatomic particles are not Paramanus. Paramanu means molecule.
Could I just say, please, I think just a minute, because what is happening...
Sir, 1 second, half a second.
I think there is a little... Because whatever is known in our ancient literature, that was only thing we can say that a pre-existing knowledge was there about things. Now, if you come to the modern science, you can't compare it. Things have changed so much. And then only things like whatever you talk about botany, or what she was talking about cell and other things. Cell is not a Paramanu. But anything, only thing we want to say that earlier times that kind of knowledge did exist. But that knowledge now we can't compare what present knowledge exists. There is no comparison now. Things have gone beyond what was known earlier. This is because what I am saying, the smallest thing of life is not cell. Smallest life is the DNA. It's the 5 elements which make up life. That is the essence of life. It's not a cell. But that time it was alright because they were talking about human system, they were talking about the body. So smallest cell is fine. Absolutely alright. So what happens? The interpretation of science is whatever the knowledge is pre-existing that time. You can't take that knowledge now and start interpreting what is.
Only one thing is, we are speaking about Shastram and you speak science, sir. That is a distinction.
Actually,
there is a distinction between science and Shastram. Please don't mingle Shastram as science. Shastra can never become science. Thank you.
Anyway.
Thank you.
Yes? That is up to Kanar. Well, you see, we are behind. We are lagging behind. It is past 10. Okay. So let me thank all the speakers, all the presenters. They have done a wonderful job of explaining the ultimate truth in their own way, in their own language. So thank you, all of you who have listened so carefully and so patiently. And I thank profusely our learned speakers, Danish, Deepak, and Vinay. What did I say, Vinay? Am I right? That lady? Vinaya and Dr. Prasad. Thank you very much. 3 cheers for all of them.
Also to the chat.